I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here we talk about true crime and psychology. Thank you so much for joining. Let's hop right into today's topic. Let's go.
Welcome. This is a case that I saw come across my timeline within the past day or so, and more details are going to continue to come out. This is a developing case. Everything I'm going to say in this video is based on my understanding of news reporting. I have links to the things that have been helpful to me as I've gathered information. And then I know Grizzly True Crime, it's 2 p.m. Eastern in about an hour. I know Grizzly True Crime is going to go live discussing this case as well. My goal, so any case I cover, I want to think about what can we learn from this situation. And so I'm definitely going to be talking about the effects of severe deprivation on a child's brain, on a developing mind. We have research. We know that certain milestones need to be met. Children need to be exposed to things by a certain time in order to have typical language development. And I also just have some tips and recommendations just in case one of the foster parents that are going to be caring for these children, just in case they come across this video, or if there are any foster or adoptive parents that have, or, kinship care, any people that come across children that have experienced this level of harm, some of the road forward, just some of the tips and things that may be helpful in general in situations like this. So, a little bit more about the case that we will be discussing today. This case comes out of Vinton County, Ohio, and the police were called to the home to execute a search warrant on something else. And we do not know exactly what that something else was. Just for a content warning, I will not be going into all of the specifics. Um, I've listened to the press conferences and the state of the home. It's my understanding at one point it was deemed unsafe for officers to even be inside because I guess the floorboards, based on what I heard, it sounded like the floorboards weren't completely stable. There were 16 children that were found in about a 12 by 12 space. And it's our understanding that for the past 4 years, these children, they have spent most of their time in that 12 by 12 space. 16 children, ranging in age from 18 years old until about maybe 1.5 years old. A lot of the younger children, they do not have medical records. So they don't have birth certificates. They don't have, so getting to know their birth dates, getting to know a lot of that information, the state is going to have to try to see how they can figure out some of that information. A lot of people are upset that the family don't have stronger charges right now, but I think they just did a significant charge so they could get in and get the children safe, because when they arrived to the home, there were 1 or 2 children that were like in a severe medical state, where I believe 2 children had to be transported by helicopter to a medical facility that I think had a trauma center. They were so it's my understanding there's severe malnutrition, that the conditions, so it's an extreme hoarding situation where they're animals, but not animal, but like there's human and there's a lot. I don't want to re-traumatize anybody, but if you would like to know the details of this case, like I said, go on ahead and take a look. I have also heard interviews of people that worked at the Dollar Tree. So it's my understanding that the mother and that some of the other family members, every now and then, they would go to a nearby Dollar Tree. They normally went out late at night, and they remember there being the smell, and that they offered them additional hygiene, supplies that I think sometimes they didn't always take. And they did sometimes see some children because the neighbors talk about not seeing any children. And there's 16 children living in this home, and the neighbors never really saw children. They were not aware that children lived there. Um, None of the children, to my understanding, were in any type of formal education, because if a child arrived to school regularly with a really severe smell, they would normally they might do a home visit. They might make sure that everything was okay at home. I have worked with individuals where their own personal hygiene was sometimes difficult. So it was just sometimes the smell was just due to their own personal hygiene. I've also worked with families that maybe they had they burned coal, like their uh the smell that their furnace put off would kind of get into people's clothes, and they would have the kind of the smoky smell. But this was like feces. This was really, really bad. And everybody that's seen it or heard it has just talked about how horrific the conditions these children were living in. Now, Elizabeth. So, Elizabeth, and I'm pulling up my information. I want to say Elizabeth Sider. Y'all know me in names. Yes. So the mother of these, we believe it's the mother of all 16 children. She is only 33 years old, but I looked up, and I didn't personally look it up based on some of the reporting that is out there, and I have links. Her lawyer has also confirmed that she was married to the father of the children, because they got married when he was 18 and she was 15 years old out in West Virginia. I think when they got married, she was likely pregnant with the child that is now 18 years old. That is my sofa speculation. Okay. So she is only 33 years old, but she was married at 15, and the oldest child is 18 years old. And there has been reporting that all of the children are her children. So that's and they're probably gonna do DNA testing. They're going to make sure, because they want to rule out any type of additional harm, specifically SA. They want to rule any of that out. The 18-year-old, based on reporting, she has significant developmental concerns. She was unable to write her name, and some of the communication. And also, like, these children are likely traumatized because they're being ripped from the only situation they know. So the condition they were living in, that was their normal. So for me, if I was to walk into a home like that, I would be like appalled. I would be gagging. Like I would have difficulty, like if I was to walk into that condition, because I've never lived in a condition that was unsanitary, unsafe. For these children, a clean environment is actually less normal for them. And so to their foster families, because sometimes children that have been raised in conditions like this, they do not know how to clean up after themselves. They do not have proper hygiene. And I'm speaking in general, but I'm guessing these children likely they I don't know that they were eating 3 meals a day, because it sounds like food might have been limited. And I think they were concerned that if the state was aware of the children, that they would take them. But these children needed to be in a safe environment. So I think that's my general thought. I think if the mother had delivered these children, and if there was a record of all of these children, I think social services might have gotten involved. There's also speculation. We have not seen anything to confirm this or not. Because it comes out of West Virginia, some people start speculating, like, could there be any type of substance issue? The grandparents, so the people arrested were the grandparents, and they're the paternal grandparents, the father of the children, who was, because he was 18 years old when she was 33. So I think he is like 6 or 37 years old right now. Based on reporting I've heard, when they got married, his reading, or no, his highest level of education completed was ninth grade at 18 years old. He was likely taking 10th grade classes, and the highest level of education she had completed was 8th grade. And I'm just saying all of this information just so that we have a general idea of what we're kind of working with. I do believe that their parental rights will likely be terminated. I don't think those children will ever return to their care. The level of now, if this had just been a little neglectful, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes the state, people do parenting classes, people try to work on it. Um, Unless there was clear evidence that she was trying, or that somebody was trying to protect these children, that they were upset about the conditions that the children were in. But what can happen is that nobody protected these children, and I do not see these individuals ever getting custody of these children back, ever. And so those are just some of my general thoughts. How many people were living in the home? So 16 children, the mother, the father, and the grandparents. So a total of 20 people living in the home, but the children all stayed in a 12 by 12 room. And it's my understanding anytime they were seen out in public, they didn't really speak that much. Um, some of the children may have speech and developmental delays, and none of the children had any type of formal education. They talked about the children's hair being matted, that there were bugs on the children. The state these children were living in was I'm trying to manage my words so that we're a little bit more YouTube friendly. It was really, really bad. And Elizabeth, so that's the mother, her lawyer has kind of objected to people using statements like livestock don't live in this type of condition, but that's some of the language that's been used at the press conferences. So I do have a link down below. If you haven't seen, a news station in that local area did an interview with Elizabeth's lawyer. So that is the 33-year-old mother, we believe, of all 16 children. I'm not sure if any of the children are twins, because she likely, if none of them are twins, she had a child back to back to back. Like as soon as she had a child, she was probably pregnant she was probably pregnant very quickly. Um, if she truly is the birth mother to all 16 of those children. If there might be a set of twins, we don't know. But it's going to be difficult because there aren't records. So there aren't formal records for these children. As I mentioned, she I don't believe she delivered these children in a traditional hospital setting. There are a lot of unknown. So the family had lived in that home for about 4 years. They've moved around. They've lived in some other places. Okay, so there could be several sets of children of twins. So I don't know that for sure. I'm just guessing. Um, uh, wow. Somebody mentioned 3 sets of twins. Wow. So I have not heard that. The criminal charges list the dates of birth. Thank you. I have not been able to take a look at that yet. So thank you for that. So with this type of case, it reminds me when I was in graduate school. I forget if we learned about this case when I was in undergrad as well. But back in the 70s, there was the case of Jeannie, and I have a link to that case down in the just the Wikipedia for that case. Um, she was severely It was a similar deprivation type case where she was kept on a like potty training chair for almost all day. She was nonverbal and severely deprived of any type of communication or anything like that. When she was removed from care, like when she was removed, I think it was from her father's care, but when she was removed from her family's care and went into state custody, a bunch of people researched because a case like this where a child has had no exposure, because I believe she was removed at 13 years old and she was completely nonverbal, and they were able to scan her brain. And if parts of your brain don't get light stimulation, if it doesn't, if you don't, if it's not exposed to education, so brain cells, the way that the brain is wired is early childhood development. They're meant to be forming new connections and new, like learning new things, developing. There can be certain sensitive periods where if certain things aren't developed within a certain period of time, a child might never be able to fully like take on this concept. We learned that with her case because she was able to produce some communication, but there were some things that, due to her, I think it was temporal lobe, and there were certain areas of her brain that were severely damaged. Those areas, even though the brain is very neuroplastic, but certain things, if it wasn't learned in that critical time period, it can make it very difficult to learn it down the road. Okay. Um, I do think these children are going to have a team of therapists. They're going to have developmental, educational, because these children, they have never been in any type of school. They likely, I don't know that they know their ABCs. They're just basic things. And so, with this being the summer, they are likely going to see what type of placements are most appropriate. They are all going to have individualized education plans. The 18-year-old might be placed in, because up until the age of 21, individuals with developmental delays can receive services through the school. So they might enroll that individual. They might still enroll her in school. And even though she's illegal, like technically 18 years old, but she likely doesn't have the capacity to make certain decisions for herself because they've been charged with child harm for the 18-year-old. And I think that's going to be due to her developmental ability and not based on her chronological age. And so we will see what happens. So I'm so glad that this has been helpful. They are definitely going to have occupational therapy, physical therapy. They are going to be in therapeutic foster care. So they are going to be placed with foster parents that have been trained and have additional training with, and they often have additional supervision. So I've worked with students in therapeutic foster care, and they often are assigned an additional case manager that manages the therapeutic side. They are all going to have psychological evaluations. They're going to try to get an idea of where their current level of functioning is. The youngest ones have the most hope to maybe early intervention might help some of the really younger ones. They might be able to catch up. Some of the ones over the age of 12, they can still get additional supports. They can still form new connections, but there may be some damage that it might be difficult to undo. They are going to, like I said, like neurological, they are likely going to throw a full battery at this situation because these kids are probably very scared. They likely didn't trust outsiders, and this is likely a very confusing, scary experience for them. They're also not all together. There's no way they would be able to place all 16 of those children together. And I also think they might be waiting on some charges, because let's say some of the kids had bruises or something, you would have to figure out how that happened, because I've worked with some situations where children had to fight for food. And they would fight each other because it was survival. There was not enough food. The parents were still charged with neglect, and the state managed things from that perspective. But let's say these children do have any marks on them or anything, they have to figure out how that happened. It's not a crime to not have enough resources, to not have enough money, but it doesn't sound like they used available supports that were there. And I think a part of that was not wanting anyone to know what was happening in the home, because I don't think they ever took all 16 children out. People were likely not aware that there were 16 children in that home. And one of the, I think, Dollar Tree workers mentioned that, like, she just wished that she had called sooner. That because sometimes you see a situation and people, they don't want to over report, because just because somebody has a foul smell doesn't necessarily mean that they're living in horrific squalor. But you can at least ask for a welfare check on a family, because if somebody had just entered the front door, but this family might not have opened it, because if there was, I don't know if they would have allowed somebody else to come in. This seems like a cultish. Now, I don't know that they're a cult. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that they're any, but sometimes there can be this isolation mentality that is cult like, even if it's not connected with a specific cult group. So sometimes within a family, if we say don't say anything, never ask anyone for food, never, like, if you have all of these rules, what happens here stays here. When you're raised in situations like that, where you know where you're almost trained to fear the outside world, if anyone knows how many siblings you have, y'all will be taken away from us. Like, that can be a us versus them, don't trust outsiders mentality, that can make it difficult when when the situation is unsafe. And this was an unsafe situation. Um uh um so these children are not used to being clean, and they have probably bathed rarely. If so, these children are not used to regular hygiene, and there is a sensory input. And so with the foster families, they will have to work out, because initially sometimes you just put a little bit of water in the bathtub. Some people will do like bubbles. They'll, even with a 15 or 16-year-old child. Now, they'd have to make sure, because with kids like this, I would want to make sure that they weren't re-victimized in some other situation. Y'all probably know the name. It was the Turpin. It was the Turpin children that were removed from their parents. And then, unfortunately, I believe it was either foster or once they were adopted, those children ended up experiencing additional harm. I want to say it was their foster parents. And so there's often high levels of supervision, and we're watching for certain warning signs with individuals like this. Um, um, all right. And even if they knew that there was no running water, I don't think anyone knew that there were 16 children inside. Once again, I don't think anyone knew that. Yeah. Okay. Um and also, children like this, sometimes they might sneak and hoard food, because living in a house that has like a regular pantry, that has a ton of food, there's a type of intervention. It's called trust-based relational intervention. It was developed by, I want to say she's Dr. Karyn Purvis. I forget if she's a doctor or not, but it was developed by Karyn Purvis, and all of her research, everything, she would say yes to food, because kids like this, if they're feeling, because sometimes, so these kids first need to feel safe, and telling a child no can make them feel unsafe. And now if they're asking to run out in the street, or if they're trying to elope, there are certain things that you're always going to set boundaries with. But sometimes around food, if right before dinner the child asks for an apple, you say yes, you can have the apple after you finish your dinner. If right before they're about to eat lunch, they ask for a banana, some granola, like, because what you do is you have a yes basket of, no matter what time it is, that if this child is feeling like they need food, that they can ask, and the answer will always be yes. There just might be conditions. And so with that, conditions might be that you just have to eat, just gotta, you can have the banana after dinner. Like, I'm putting dinner on the table right now. And so you can have it after dinner. Um, I don't believe in children stealing food. I know. I know. Like, that's like, it's so often individuals that have been raised in severe conditions like this, sometimes they might hoard food. And so we used to take a little, like, small Tupperware container, and we would have some healthy snacks in it. And the client I was working with would be allowed to keep that small Tupperware container in their room. And at any time they could ask to have it refilled. So if they did eat all those snacks, because it might be about 300 calories, like, it's not like a ton of food, but sometimes just letting them have access to food when they feel like they need it, and then just monitoring for, like, gorging and hoarding food. I've sometimes worked with individuals that didn't have, they couldn't feel when they were hungry. So anytime there was food, they felt like they had to eat all of it. So even though the child was 4 years old, if you put 5 cheeseburgers in front of the 4-year-old's going to eat all 5 cheeseburgers. And if you put six, like that, they're just gonna, no matter what food you put in front of them, they're going to try to eat it all. Sometimes with cases like that, we have had to set restrictions around, okay, you can have first and seconds, and then you have to, like, wait an hour because we're just trying to make sure that it's healthy. And so if you want an apple, but you're not getting another portion of, because if it's a 4-year-old who's already had a large helping of lasagna, they've had seconds of lasagna, and now they're still wanting more and more food. Sometimes setting boundaries around that, of like, hey, you can have an apple, you can have this, but sometimes setting boundaries around that. All right. And so with normal brain development, um, we normally see that between the age of birth to 12 months, the brain begins to recognize speech sounds. Babies learn the rhythm and sounds of their native language, and they start babbling and engaging in serve and return interactions. About 1 to 3 years old, there is rapid speech development. Kids normally go from speaking like 1 to 2 words to, sometimes by 3 years old, they might be speaking, like, their vocabulary grows explosively. And this is in a normal, typical environment where a child is being exposed to appropriate developmental. So, like, people are reading to the child. So reading, we know that kids' vocabulary grow when we read to them. They recommend 20 minutes every day. As a working parent, it was really hard for me to do the 20 minutes every day. And so what I ended up doing was, and I saw a question, and I'm going to get to it. So we had an app where my kid could have the book read to him. So I used Epic. This is not sponsored. I get nothing for saying it. We don't use that one anymore. Our library actually has a free app now that where you can have where you can go through read along books. And so for families that struggle with like being able to sit down and read for 20 minutes, if they do have access to a device where they can have even the free library app and just but a kid listening to words being read to them for about 20 minutes a day can be really helpful to brain development. Do you think this case is similar to the Turpins? And so I want more information because I really wonder if there was, because they were being investigated for something else, something that was not child related. They were not aware that children were even there. So I really have questions to what else was going on in that home. So I have more questions about that right now. So we will see. All right. Aw. Someone mentioned I taught both my kids to read before they went to school. I assume that was my job. Yes. So my kiddo wasn't reading before kindergarten, but by the end of kindergarten, he was reading. I didn't even expect like I thought in kindergarten they'd just be like breaking graham crackers and like he already knew his ABCs before going into kindergarten, but I wasn't expecting him to be able to read, but Virginia, like they have high standards because kids so he had sight words. We had to work with him on sight words every day. This does bring up the issue of homeschooling again and how sometimes but once again, the state, nobody was aware that there were 16 children. These children most of them have likely never had medical care. And so there are going to be full workups done on all of these children. All right. So back to development, about 3 to 5 years old, they start to develop some grammar. Once again, the vocabulary continues to expand dramatically. Around 5 to 7 years old, language systems are largely established. So by 5 to 7 years old, the brain still remains highly adaptable, but acquiring language from scratch becomes increasingly difficult. So we typically say between like 5 to 7 that is a sensitive period where we want somebody exposed to their native language and where they've been talked to, where they are interacting. Once again, I don't know what the adults were doing in with I have more questions than answers about this case. Learning after puberty, so learning new vocabulary after puberty is still very possible, but achieving native-like grammar and pronunciation in a first language that was never learned becomes less likely. So once a person has kind of hit puberty, if they've never been exposed to their native language, once again in a more severe type situation, that where them being able to learn all the grammar and and pronunciation, that becomes more difficult. And we know that based on cases like Jeannie. And so delayed speech, smaller vocabulary, difficulty understanding grammar, challenges with reading and writing, reduced verbal reasoning, and difficulty with social communication. So things like taking turns, interpreting tone, all of those things. Is this reversible? So partially it can be, and it really depends on the timing and the intervention. And so what they would want to do is make sure so these kids are probably also going to have speech therapy. And once again, they're probably going to get individualized education plans. The school system is likely a part of this assessment team because they're going to have to figure out if some of these kiddos might need therapeutic programs. Are they going to be able to, because these kids have probably, I don't know if they've been around other children outside of their siblings before. And I don't know that they have appropriate social skills. And so like there's so much that these kids are are going to need. And so they were all in one 12 by 12. So we don't know if the room was locked, and but they stayed in a 12 by 12 space according to reporting. Some of the children did leave the home to go to the store with a parent, but they did not engage or interact with. So the store clerk said they saw the children, and the children seemed like timid, and but like the children did not speak or any of that. All right. And so, whew, all right. And so language development can be like building a house. The early years are when the foundation is poured. If that foundation is delayed, you can still build a strong house later. It just takes a lot more work. And some parts may not look exactly the same as if the foundation had been laid at that appropriate time. And so that's where, once again, I do think there is hope that there can definitely be some improvement with intervention, but once again, these children, so for the 18-year-old, how they have lived has been her normal. And so going into an environment that is what I would deem safe might feel unsafe to that 18-year-old. And so that's where being patient, building relationship, looking at sensory needs, because there might be some things that are stimulating. They might be like an elopement risk. So sometimes, like, the child wants to try to find their parent, they don't really understand what's going on. The younger children sometimes adapt to the situation better, but they often have more behavioral concerns. So sometimes older children, they might kind of have an attitude. I don't know, like sometimes older children might be more sneaky, but often with younger children, we can often see some behavioral concerns. And I have heard of such, and so I used to work in a residential treatment center, and I used to read the charts, because there would be like 5 to 6 for each kid. There would be a social history that was just pages of just all of these things that this child has been through. At the residential facility, I worked with the youngest kids age, they were about age 5 to, I think, 8 years old. And hopefully these children are able to be stabilized in therapeutic foster homes, and they don't need some type of institution. But sometimes the behaviors and everything is unsafe, and they do end up needing some type of inpatient care for a period of time. I do not know what will happen with these kids. I do just hope that the individuals around, that they have patience. So the therapeutic foster families, because maybe for these kids, um, they might only be able to they might only be able to tolerate being bathed like every other day. So my kiddo gets a bath every day. Like, it's just what we've done since he was a child. Sometimes, as you're building trust, as you're building new patterns, now these kids could end up loving water. They could end up loving the environments that they're in. They could end up adjusting incredibly well. And I hope that is the experience. I've done this work for a long time, and the individuals that ended up in my office were typically ones that were struggling. And their struggle was with, this was so outside of their norm, and it was really working with the foster family to be more flexible, and for us to develop, so for the child to feel safe, have that felt safety, and then to just work on and address whatever behaviors and things were there. Let me know if y'all have any final questions. This case is, it's super, super heavy. Um, One of the things I wanted to mention is that the developing brain is extraordinary and adaptable. Even after profound neglect, children can learn, build relationships, and make meaningful developmental changes. Recovery is often a long process rather than like a complete return to a typical developmental path. The outcomes will definitely vary from child to child. Um, I don't know that these kids have like played with toys, and so making sure that like just letting these kids play, letting these kids, I don't know, like this is I really do have hope that things will be better. I did hear that the father had been charged with indecent exposure in the past. Uh I heard that during one of the press conferences, and um because of the language skills of these children, now a forensic evaluation is likely going to include some play therapy. It's hard to but like because I think the communication skills might make it difficult to find out exactly what happened. Now, if people are silly and if they recorded it on their devices, because they're likely doing a full forensic data download, like they are investigating everything with this case. And so if they do find anything, I think they'll definitely look into it. It's my understanding that the charge that they're facing is pretty significant. That could put them away for a long period of time. And there's a criminal side and there's a family court side. So the family court side, we will not know what's happening on that end. There's likely a protective order where there's no contact with the parents. Um, Sometimes even in cases where the parent has been harmful to the child, sometimes the family court, until they've been convicted, sometimes the family court does require contact. For this case, and the severity of it, and with us not knowing like what these kids have truly endured, because they just can't tell us yet, I could see there being a no contact order. It's my understanding that the mother, Elizabeth, once again 33 years old, married at 15. It sounds like she loves her kids. I have concerns that she wasn't able to appropriately care for them. And just based on the reporting, she allegedly was not able to create a safe and stable environment for her children to thrive and grow. And that fear of the state taking them, I think that made them, go even further into, because they could have had resources. There could have been supports. I don't know that those resources would have changed anything, though. I'll just be honest. I don't know that all of this happened because they didn't have the resources. The level of depravity that I've heard about, this is something deeper. I wonder if she has her own history of trauma, but like, that only if that comes up in court. Her lawyer, as I mentioned, I have a link to it down in the description. Her lawyer seems to be advocating for her and trying to get a different narrative out there. She does not portray herself to be a victim, according to her lawyer, because a lot of people would wonder, okay, you were married at 15. Like, did you feel like you couldn't leave this family? Like, what was really going on? But sometimes when someone is in the midst of it, they don't really see how twisted. I don't know. Like, so I don't know what her normal is either. And so we will see. Super duper sad. They are each being held on $300,000 bonds, and they will likely stay in jail. The only reason why I was mentioning family court is because sometimes, even while in jail, sometimes family court can still allow weekly phone visits, or but I think there will be a protective order. They'll likely not have any contact with the children for a period of time until they fully understand what these children have gone through and if there are any additional charges. Because they have to do what's in the best interest of these children. These children are likely going to want to talk to their parents. Okay. These are their but once again, this was their normal, and that's why sometimes, even in a case where there has been confirmed or alleged harm, sometimes the family court does still allow some contact until the criminal case is finalized. But in this case, because of the lack of ability to communicate that's been alleged with these children, I think they're going to protect the kids, and they're likely going to have no contact until they fully understand what's been going on. Um, I heard somewhere that the house was in like a trust or something. So I don't. I'm sure Grizzly True Crime is going to look into this deeper. I don't know. How can they talk to their parents if they can't talk? So I don't know how involved the parents were with the children. So the children were just in a room for 4 years, 12 by 12. The landlord died a year ago, somebody said. So I have more questions than answers. This is definitely gonna be a case that I follow. Um Somebody talked about the maternal grandmother has been looking for her daughter, Elizabeth, for years. She posted on Facebook every year on her daughter's birthday. So if the maternal grandparents are safe people, eventually down the road, but that's where West Virginia everybody's gonna have to figure out if this is a safe situation, and they would have to just make sure that everybody was really so what would happen is West Virginia would do a home study, and all of those things would happen because when you terminate parental rights, social services, legally, they often have to give biological family a first chance if they do want custody of children, but that biological family has to be appropriate, and so that's going to be a whole other process where we aren't fully going to know what's going to happen. Um, super duper sad case. Well, I think you mentioned speech pathologist here. Amazing. 80% of speech and development is learned within the first 3 years of life, developmentally. Yes. Praying for all the children. Thank you for mentioning that. Um, uh, in general, when I'm doing psychological testing, I sometimes have situations where I refer people for additional testing because sometimes I have concerns that, so if I'm testing a 6-year-old, a 7 or an 8-year-old, and I'm concerned about their receptive and expressive language, I will often refer to speech therapy. Also, if there's an issue with fluency, sometimes the school doesn't always catch some of those things because it has to impede learning. And sometimes they don't know what's impeding learning. And so I often refer to speech therapists and other types of therapists as well. Occupational therapists, physical therapists. These children may end up with ABA services. So applied behavioral analysis. My thing with ABA is that it has to be trauma informed because sometimes ABA just looks at behavior and changing a behavior. But if the root is trauma and you just try to give a sticker, like you doesn't always, like you have to address some of those other issues and things. And so, I used to work for a large company and I used to consult with their team anytime there was a ABA case that had that had any type of trauma component because we wanted to make sure that we weren't re-traumatizing a child because sometimes we would work on cases where children would disrobe or they would maybe start to like become physically aggressive during certain situations and things, and we just had to figure out how can we, number one, keep this child safe, and then how do we, number two, make sure that we're not doing something that's creating more trauma. And so super duper. This is a lot, but definitely going to be keeping an eye on it. Um, with this, I think the World Cup game is going on right now. It is hot here in Virginia. It is cool. It is so hot. There's Earth, Virginia, and then the sun, and we are so close to the sun right now. Like it is, because somebody asked, "Oh, where are y'all going to see the 4th of July fireworks?" And I'm like, I am staying at home. We will be watching on YouTube. Like it is too hot. If you do decide to go out, and if you're in the midst of the heat wave, heat bubble, please hydrate. Make sure that you know the signs of heat exhaustion, heat stroke, that you drink before. So if you're going out for 4th of July, you need to start drinking water now. So make sure that you're really hydrated, and we're going to be staying inside. It's just it's too hot. I know some neighbors will have fireworks going off and stuff, but yeah, we're just staying home. I'm going to be doing a members only live on Sunday. So I will be twisting my hair on Sunday and answering y'all's true crime questions. And thank you to everybody that subs, to everybody that comments, to everybody that engaged here. If you're new here, welcome. Here we talk about psychology and true crime, and our goal is to learn, laugh, and grow. All right. And our saying here is to be kind and don't do crimes. Like, doesn't seem hard, but it is what it is. Oh, wow. You were in Springfield, Virginia, in Fredericksburg last week. So I work in Fredericksburg. So that is where my office is. And so that is super cool. And I go to the Springfield Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's. I go like once a month, and I absolutely love it. I appreciate this community so much. I try to talk about these things from a balanced way. And all these charges are alleged. The conditions that the children were found in seem to be clearly unsafe, and it'll be on the state to prove what crime or crimes occurred, and then it will be up to a jury to decide. I could see Elizabeth potentially flipping, especially if she can get in touch with her mom, but I don't know if she will. Um, I don't know. This situation really reminds me of a cultish, like, and I'm not saying it is, but like it seems like a very, very closed group, cut off from the outside world. And she may just want her children. She, like, I don't know if she still very much loves her husband. And I don't know if she really truly gets just how bad things were. Two of the children were very close to not being, like, this was almost a red rum case. Like, this could have been if they had not intervened that day. And so super super duper sad. But I will be enjoying the World Cup and trying to stay cool. I will see members on Sunday. Thank you for being a member for 4 months. I try to make most of my content available for everybody. And thank you to Ruth for being a member for 2 months. And I truly, truly appreciate all of you. Yes, completely, a totally isolated family. And we will see where things go. Because it's my understanding that Elizabeth does want some type of contact with her children, and but she has to be a safe person. And so that's in jail. I don't know if she'll get some mental health treatment, if that's available in Ohio. Ohio doesn't have the my understanding. I've met therapists in Ohio, and they often say Virginia is ranked higher for what they have available for mental health. But I hope that she does some parenting classes. She's still very young. And if she, let's say she was charged, let's say she did 2 years and was somehow released, there can sometimes be a record where if this person ever comes to the hospital and has a baby, that social services is notified. Like sometimes that happens. I do think they're going to be facing significant amount of years. But we will see. That's all I have for today. Be kind, don't do crimes, and I will see you all next time. Hope you have a great 4th, and I will see you all. Have a good one. Bye.